Welcome back to Homeschool Conversations with Humility and Doxology, and this summer we are enjoying a special guest audioblog series. Today's guest podcaster is Sarah Miller from Homeschooling for Him. She's going to be talking about reading better together, make learning to read fun. I hope this gives you tips and encouragement that you can apply this summer and in the following school year. Be sure to check the show notes to find out more about Sarah. What if I told you that there was a way to incorporate freedom into your homeschool planning? A way to blend flexibility and a well-ordered day. Homeschool planning doesn't have to be scary. I have created a free homeschool planning guide to help you ask the right big picture questions to set your long-term homeschool goals, and it will also give you 7 simple steps to craft a peaceful, orderly homeschool plan. If you want access to this free ebook, just head to humilityandoxology.com/homeschool-planning-guide or just click the link in the show notes.
Reading Better Together, Make Learning to Read Fun by Sarah Miller.
The first key in teaching your kids to read is to start early and to make it all about the relationship, the bond that you and your child share around books. Your job when your kids are really young is to help your kids learn to associate books with spending quality time with you. This can start when your child is just a baby. That said, though, if your kids are older, that's fine too. Start where you are now. Start today. Another really important thing to keep in mind is to get your child involved with the book. When they're really young, you can read the book and they can turn the pages. Or if they're too young to be able to separate the pages, you can grab the page and lift it up just a little bit for them and then have them turn it the rest of the way. Or you can look for interactive books, anything with flaps for your child to open, or those touch and feel books for babies are really great for this. For slightly older kids, toddlers, and preschoolers, look for those interactive books with directions to follow. Really, there are a lot of options here. The key is just that you want reading time to be really fun, and you want it to be all about the snuggles and the undivided attention and the quality time with you. And this time should continue even when your child is older and even when they can read independently. I wanted to quickly share some research with you that backs up this idea about starting to read to your child when they're really young. Experts are pretty much unanimous in saying that babies should routinely experience shared books with a parent as soon as they experience shared talking. So that's right away during the first few weeks and months of their life. Also, the one-on-one attention and the quality time that kids get from parents during reading aloud encourages them to like books later in life. The greatest amount of brain growth in a baby occurs between birth and age 5. And in fact, by age 3, 85% of your child's brain's core structure is already formed. I love this statistic because who is responsible for your child when they're first born, when they're little? Parents, right? And then if we're the ones that are teaching our kids during those years, when 85% of their brain's core structure is formed, aren't we qualified to teach them for the last 15% after they hit age 5? I sure think so. By age 2, another study says children who are read to regularly display greater language comprehension, also a larger vocabulary, and higher cognitive skills than children who aren't read to regularly. And this continues for years into the future. Studies have linked kids' success in school at ages 9 and 10 to the amount of language that they hear spoken or read to them between birth and age 3. There's a lot of research about reading to little kids, but a question that I get asked a lot is, what if my child is older? When are they too old for me to read to them? And a really common misconception is that once your child is old enough to read on their own, it's okay or even beneficial to stop reading out loud to them. That's just not true. There are actually a lot of benefits to reading out loud to older children and to children who can read to themselves. When you are reading out loud to your child, you can choose books that are more difficult to read than ones that they would be reading to themselves. and you can expose them to more complicated stories and plots. And this is a great way to keep them moving forward in their understanding of stories. They'll be exposed to new vocabulary when you read out loud to them. And this can be a great family bonding experience, no matter how old your child is, if you choose the right books. So my encouragement to you is, no matter what ages your children are, today is the day to start reading out loud to them if you aren't doing that already. It's never too late to start building this habit. And it's totally okay if it seems strange or awkward at first, or especially if you have older kids. The key is just to start somewhere. And the cool thing is, you don't have to be perfect about it. There are studies that show that even just reading together 3 times a week is enough to start seeing a noticeable, measurable difference in kids. And here's where we're going to talk about the process of teaching your child how to read. And one of the biggest keys in this process in teaching your child how to read while helping them still love reading is to really observe where they are in the process and make sure that you are adapting what you're doing to fit what they need. The most important thing to keep in mind here is that you want to wait for your child to be ready to learn to read. One of the biggest traps that parents fall into is that they try to start formal reading lessons with their kids before their kids are ready. And this can make kids frustrated and turn off the love of reading that we've worked so hard to build with all that reading out loud. So this begs the question, how do you know when your child is ready, right? So the first thing to keep in mind is that reading readiness is a developmental process, and it happens at a slightly different time for everyone. On the extremes, it could be as early as age 3 or as late as age 7, but for most kids, it will fall somewhere in that range between ages 3 and 7. There are some things that you can do to help prepare your kids, but there's also a genetic component. Just like all kids grow in height at a different rate and some get taller faster than others, some kids will be ready to read sooner than others. And as much as we would all probably like to, there's not much that we can do to influence that. Just like we can't really influence our kids' height. So it will probably be different between different siblings in the same family too. So it's really, really important to make sure that you're waiting until your child is ready. One of the first steps that kids will need to do in order to be ready is to know their alphabet letters. Ideally, you want them to know both the names of the letters and also the sounds that each letter makes. The way that we teach this in our house is playing with magnetic letters on the refrigerator. We'll get out a small group of magnetic letters and we'll practice the sounds and the names of those letters and then add on another group. Kids will also need to understand that words make sounds and that each group of letters on the page is one word. A few other signs that you can be looking for to know that your child is ready to learn to read. First, they're going to start to recognize letters in other places when they see them. They might recognize that there's letters on a t-shirt and ask you what they say, or they might recognize the letters on a sign. Also, you might notice your child holding a book and pretending to read it. And this is another clue. This one's my favorite. They might be holding the book upside down or flipping the pages backwards or telling a story to their stuffed animal, but this is a sign that your child might be ready to read. So my challenge to you is just to take some time today to observe your child. Or if they're already a reader, take a few minutes and listen to them read and really think about what could be the thing that would help them on the next step of their reading journey. The thing that's really helped me be able to add more reading time to our family's day has been to get really creative about when to do it. I think one of the best ways to add more reading is to find creative times to do it when your kids have downtime or when you're already doing something else. So I want to share 3 quick ideas that are working really well for our family right now. And hopefully this will inspire you to think of some creative ideas that will work for your family as well. The first time that I really love to read to my kids is during meals and especially during breakfast. So right now our routine is working out that my kids eat breakfast together and I eat breakfast separately either before or after their breakfast so that I can spend some time during their breakfast time reading to them. We use this time to do our homeschool reading, our Bible study, our history and science lessons, anything that needs to be read out of a textbook. But it's also a great time to just do some read alouds and spend some time reading to your child. Another time that we really like to incorporate reading is when we're in the car and when we're traveling. And this one is especially good for summer travels and summer vacations. This started when my kids were really young because we had a bunch of those sound books where you could push the button and it would play the sound that went with the page. And we put all of those in the car so that my kids had those available to them as we were driving. We have since graduated from those books, but we still keep a selection of books in the backseat of the car, and my kids love to read whenever we're traveling. And then finally, you could choose to add a dedicated reading time right before your child goes to bed. This can be wonderful in the summer when it stays light out later at night. You can give your child a few extra minutes to stay awake and read some books before they go to sleep. Or you can back up their bedtime 15 or 30 minutes early and have those last 15 to 30 minutes be a scheduled reading time. This is something that my parents did for me when I was a child and something that I still remember as an adult as one of the key factors in helping me learn to love books. And so it's something that we're doing with our kids now as well. I do want to add a really important reminder here. And I mentioned this earlier, but I do think it's worthwhile to repeat it. And that is that perfection is not required here. It's okay to create a routine and then to miss some days or to do it inconsistently. That's still better than doing nothing at all. Please give yourself permission to be human and to miss some days, especially during the summer. The important thing here is that you're taking steps to include reading in some way. And the cool thing is that the science actually backs this up. There's actually some grace here for parents who are busy and sometimes forget. This study that I read says that children who are read to at least 3 times a week by a family member are almost twice as likely to score in the top 25% on a reading test compared to children who are read to less than 3 times a week. I love that study because the benchmark that we're trying to hit there is 3 times a week. So you can miss more days than you read, and your child will still see noticeable, measurable benefits according to this study. So cool. So your action step for this one is to do some brainstorming. Maybe you already have some ideas, or maybe you want to try some of the ones that I mentioned, or maybe it triggered another idea for you. Either way, take some time to think about when you can add reading into your family's routine and make it a part of your regular scheduled day. Then I want you to try one of those ideas today. The key is to take action now before you forget and go back to your routine, and that'll help you make those new habits stick.
Thanks so much for listening to the Homeschool Conversations audio blog series. I'm so thankful for each of the guests who are sharing their ideas with us this summer. Check the show notes to find more resources from today's guest. And would you please take a moment to leave a rating and review for this podcast in your app? It really helps other homeschool parents find the show. Would you like a copy of my free homeschool planning guide? Head to humilityand.doxology.com/homeschool-planning-guide or check the link in the show notes for this episode. I'm busy recording more scintillating interviews for season 6 of the podcast. But in the meantime, there are so many fabulous episodes you can catch up on this summer. Check today's show notes to see this week's podcast replay suggestion.